Good afternoon, everyone. For those who are gathered here in person, I'd ask if you can take your seats and we'll begin the program. My name is Matt Ewalt. I serve the Texas Tribune as Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Welcome to those joining us here in person in Fort Worth at Tarrant County College's Trinity River campus, and those joining us online for our conversation today, titled Inside the Interim, a conversation with Fort Worth lawmakers. We are joined today by State Representative Salman Bhojani, State Representative Nicole Collier, and State Senator Phil King, and our moderator is Texas Tribune politics reporter James Barragán. Our program will run an hour, with 45 minutes for conversation and 15 minutes for your questions. Here in Fort Worth, we have a mic on a mic stand right in the back here for our in-person audience, and our virtual audience can submit questions online at our Q&A portal, texastribune.org/ask. That's texastribune.org/ask. We are grateful for the support of our sponsors. Our major sponsors are Methodist Healthcare Ministries, Every Texan, Raise Your Hand Texas, and the Texas Association of Community Colleges. And though corporate sponsors and donors underwrite this event, they play no role in determining the content, speakers, or line of questioning. We also want to thank our host, Tarrant County College, and the incredible team here to offer a welcome on behalf of Tarrant County College is Chancellor Elva LeBlanc.
I'm a little shorter than Matt. Thank you, Matt, and welcome to all. We're pleased to host today's conversation with Fort Worth lawmakers. I want to also take this opportunity to thank our Tarrant County legislators for their support of House Bill 8. This new funding model has enhanced the focus of community colleges across the state of Texas. Our renewed focus on student outcomes and high-demand job placements will greatly impact the entire Texas economy. I'm honored to serve as Chancellor of Tarrant County College, in great part due to the support of the TCC Board of Trustees. With us today is the longest-serving trustee, Dr. Gwendolyn Morrison. Please help me thank her for being here. Last Friday, we celebrated our Employee Appreciation event, which saluted our Tarrant County College colleagues for years of service and academic excellence. This week is Connections Week at our campuses, when faculty members prepare for the return of our students next week. Here, representing our faculty is the chair of the Joint Consultation Committee, James Gleaton. Please help me acknowledge him. He works tirelessly on behalf of our students. The House Bill 8 legislation has heightened our focus to provide advanced true-to-career learning and workforce development that prepare our students to stay in the region and supercharge the economy. We're excited about today's conversation and appreciate our guests for taking time out of their busy schedules to visit with us and share their insights and priorities for the upcoming 2025 legislative session. Of course, I'm particularly interested in hearing that community colleges will be at the top of that list of priorities. Again, thank you and welcome to Tarrant County College.
Thank you so much, Chancellor, and thank you to the staff that has been incredible supporting today's event. I also want to thank all those around the state who make the journalism of the Tribune, including our events, possible. And they make it possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. To learn more and to become a member, you can visit texastribune.org/support. Tickets are also on sale for Texas's breakout politics and policy event, the Texas Tribune Festival, which returns to downtown Austin in 3 weeks, September 5th through 7th. Join us for 3 days of conversations about the issues that matter to Texans and one of the most unpredictable national election cycles in recent memory at our annual celebration of big, bold ideas. You can find our full program and purchase your tickets at trib.it. So now let's get to know our panel. State Representative Salman Bhojani was sworn in as one of the first Muslims and the first South Asians to serve in the Texas Legislature, and is the first person of color ever elected to represent House District 92. He serves on the House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence and the House Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services. He also serves as the chairman of the Criminal Procedure Subcommittee on the House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence. State Representative Nicole Collier has represented House District 95 since 2013 and is the first woman to represent her district. In the 88th Texas Legislature, she was chosen to serve as second vice chair to the House Democratic Caucus. Additionally, Collier was reappointed to serve on the House Committee on Public Health and newly appointed to the House Committee on Culture, Recreation, and Tourism. She works as a trial attorney and is a partner at West & Associates, LLP in Fort Worth. And State Senator Phil King serves as the vice chair of the Senate Business and Commerce Committee and as the vice chair of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee. He previously served as state representative and Parker County Justice of the Peace. He was a police officer in Fort Worth for 15 years, a reserve officer for 26 years, and continues to serve in the Texas State Guard. He is a practicing attorney and small business owner. And our moderator today, James Barragán, is a politics reporter for the Texas Tribune with a focus on accountability reporting. Prior to joining the Tribune, he worked as a State House reporter for the Dallas Morning News and had previous stints at the Austin American-Statesman and the Los Angeles Times. In 2021, he was a finalist for the Toner Prize for Excellence in Local Reporting for his coverage of Texas politics during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he just recently completed a Nieman Fellowship at Harvard University. I thank our panel and our audience for being here in Fort Worth and around the state this afternoon. And with that, I turn the program over to my colleague, James.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to Tarrant County College for what I hope will be a lively and stimulating conversation. Since we are at an institution of higher education, I thought it would be good to start off with higher education as a topic. There's been a lot of news about expansion of UTA in Tarrant County, expansion of Texas A&M and growing their footprint here. And obviously we are here at a higher education institution. So I want to ask, sort of, with the expansion of these four-year universities here and being here at a community college, what is it that you all feel that the expansion of these big universities can bring to Tarrant County, and what kind of workforce development, especially, is needed here in Tarrant County that those new additions can bring here? If you want to start off, Representative Bhojani, and we can go down the line.
Thank you, James. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's an honor to be here, not only with sharing the stage with the esteemed my colleagues, but also with so many people that I see here that are really well known to me. But it's an honor to be here, and I feel like education is so important. Right? I came to America when I was 19 years old, and went to a public school or community college in Dallas County, Community College, Brookhaven, and that's how I got my education. That is what led me to be a great community public servant, to put food on the table for my family and live the American dream, and also serve as a state representative. And so I feel like we want to promote that as much as possible. Higher education also allows good workforce development, right? We're seeing topics of technology, of AI, blockchain, and that's so important to make sure that our workforce is developed for that, because the technology is already there. is it there for everybody, and how is it going to be there for everybody until we have people that are working at these big technology firms? It's also good for the economy, right? It's going to bring in a lot of construction jobs here right now. It's going to also provide that economic boost that we need in Tarrant County and Fort Worth as well. And lastly, it also is important to make sure that when these institutions invest locally, our students that call Tarrant County home will attend those institutions and will stay locally, right? Because if they go to another state or another part of the state or anywhere else, they may stay there, and so we will lose that workforce as well. And so it's really important. I filed a bill last session. I'll try to file it again to make sure that we have funding for the most people that cannot afford education, especially the two-year associate's degree for community and technical colleges. So I look forward to working with, especially, I think Senator Phil King is also a big proponent on community colleges, and so I look forward to working with him hand in hand to promote that. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I ditto and echo what Representative Bhojani said, and I am happy to be here as well. I am an alumni of TCC. I went to TCC myself, so I'm glad to be here in my home, one of my home schools. On top of the information that Representative Bhojani said, I think about when you talk about expansion, you want to make sure that there's access. So I think that's one of the things that these universities provide is access. But we also have to make sure that they're affordable and making sure that there's affordability. So I do like the opportunities. It also, it's a chance for these universities to do more partnerships with our high schools, with our public schools. Crowley ISD is here, and they do a great job of partnering with colleges and universities. Everman ISD, another district and school district in my district that I represent, does a partnership with TCC. So I'm just very proud of the opportunity that these schools being locally provide in terms of access. In terms of workforce development, one thing I do see one of the many things I see TCC does right is making sure that they are aware of what the workforce needs are and creating programs to meet those needs. So if AI is the new way of the world, TCC will create a program. And I'm starting to see our school districts do the same thing. And we have to make sure that we provide that flexibility to allow them to create those partnerships and those new programs and then send the money down. We have to fund those programs because if they're a priority, we will show it with our money. And so we do want to make sure that we have a ready workforce that have all the tools that they need to succeed. And we can do that by electing people who share the same values to fully fund our public schools and invest in the future of our students.
Thanks. And I'll confess, Chancellor, I was a TCC graduate as well, although the confession part is that when I went, it was TCJC. So it's been a little while, but, and then Nicole and I are both alum from Texas A&M School of Law. So I know we've both got a huge interest in what the A&M system's doing in downtown, and that's just, you couldn't have imagined something that'll be better for downtown in terms of economic development and for the next 50 years, really. Personally, I'm very, very excited about the UTA expansion, which will be in Parker County. A lot of us have been working, of course, led by UTA on that for a year or so, and it's a wonderful opportunity. It'll be just barely in Parker County, which is nice since I'm from Parker County, but we like to get something every now and then. But it's right on the Tarrant-Parker County line. It's going to be wonderful. It's amazing when you build an engineering school like that, the businesses that come for collaboration with that and come up around it, and so that's going to be wonderful for that community. And, of course, in the long run for all the homeowners, it offsets those property taxes because we need business, we need commercial taxes and things like that as well. If you haven't kept up with Fort Worth demographics, Fort Worth in not too many years is going to be heavier in population than Dallas. And if you go to 2060, the center of the DFW Metroplex, which today is basically the airport, is going to be Interstate 30 at White Settlement Road. So all the growth is going west, and that's why it was such a brilliant move for A&M system to make that larger footprint in downtown, for UTA to put their footprint just on the Tarrant-Parker County line. The growth is going in that direction. In fact, Parker's now, I think, the 11th fastest growing county, over 50,000 in the United States. And it's really just a partner. Maddie Parker and I, in fact, Maddie used to work for me in my legislative office, or I worked for her actually, but we partner up, spend a lot of time talking about Fort Worth and Tarrant County. And so with that, I'm excited to be here, and I'm really excited about TCC as an alum, and certainly really pumped about UTA setting up a Western campus for West Tarrant County and East Parker County. Thank you.
Senator King, if I could stay on you, speaking about that sort of westward expansion, and we're in Fort Worth, but you cover a lot of rural areas further west and south. And so what does it mean to have more places of higher education for those communities? You see sometimes that the young people there are looking to go elsewhere and could go to other parts of the state or other parts of the country, but there's an interest, obviously, in keeping those folks in your community. What do you think this does for that?
Well, every community wants to have jobs where their kids don't move off, as mine did at one point. Fortunately, they've kind of moved back here now, which is important because we've got 18 grandkids and you want them nearby. So, so the Senate district runs basically from Mansfield west to Brownwood. So it's got everything from, very obviously dense parts. Nicole and I share part of the same area in Tarrant County, and to Shackelford County with 4,000 people. And I think, we've got a really good community college system across the state, certainly in this district going west. Kids like to leave college when they can. They like to go off. A lot of them like to stay at home. And employment opportunities mean a lot. So I don't really know how to answer that, except that more education opportunities are always better, whether it's I think at the public school level, at the K through 12 level, as well as for college. For me, it was going to work right out of high school and going right and attending TCC part-time and becoming a police officer and finishing up college that way. So everybody does it a different way. But the key is that there's opportunities that you can afford and that are available and that you can take advantage of.
And then I'll ask Representatives Bhojani and Collier, you both came to community colleges, so went to TCC, and I just want to ask sort of what more can be done to sort of pump up community colleges? I feel like in schools a lot of the times the main thing that kids are thinking about is going to four-year universities. But what do community colleges offer that maybe gets overlooked? And just through your experience, I mean, you guys came to community colleges and then went on to be lawyers and small business people. And so what do community colleges offer, and what can you all do as legislators to sort of increase interest in community colleges?
Well, we shouldn't get in their way. Sometimes you can file a bunch of bills and legislation, and it just creates more barriers to access. But I think people go to community colleges for different reasons. It's for the community. Typically it's they have campuses in different parts of the area, so you can choose which one you go to. So access is wonderful, and then there's a variety of courses that they offer. I can learn different trades or skills, or I can get a start with my basic courses. Or if I need to have a little bit more help with the math course. I know when I went to college, I wasn't math ready. So TCC helped me become math ready. And I see that that's happening a lot. But getting me the resources and getting me prepared, but that was my choice. It could be that I'm getting you ready to be a part of the next industry or the next job that is coming through. We have the South Point Constructors is building $1 billion highway improvements in our district, House District 95. We need a workforce. We need to have them ready. TCC is doing that. They're getting people ready to work and be prepared to take on and make money and invest in our community. So I think that, the access and the diversity and the welcoming spirit that is provided at the community college was what attracted me. And the time of the course. I mean, it really worked out. I didn't want to take a 7 a.m. course, but the time of the course was great.
Thank you. So for me, it was affordability. That's why I did that, because I had just been an immigrant from Pakistan and came here, and we couldn't afford a university tuition. And a lot of options, right? If I wanted to take courses that were not squarely within my major, I could do it. And that the teacher interaction as well was a lot, I felt was good. And then I went to UTD, and we have Amanda here from UTD as well, and that's what gave me a great boost as well for the economy or for the job that I had later on. But I think affordability is important, and then also, how can we do public-private partnerships? Because I talk to a lot of businesses in my district, and they tell me that sometimes what is being taught in schools does not translate well into their profession, right? So there's a gap. How can we minimize that gap by having these public-private partnerships? I'll give you an example. So I was taking a tour of the American Airlines facility here in North Texas, and that's in my district. I'm honored to have that's the largest business in my district. And I spoke to them, like, what do you need from me as a legislator? And so we talked about how, like, the aircraft maintenance technician, it doesn't need a huge degree for it, right? Can we create a program at community college or universities that can resonate or that can teach people to be aircraft maintenance technicians, and they have a job immediately, and you're teaching them practical skills? It's sort of like an apprenticeship programs, right? You're teaching them on-the-job skills that are immediately transferable, and you don't have to go to a 4-year degree. I mean, it's not for everybody. 4-year degrees are great. I tell my kids to go to universities, but I think it's important. People may not be able to afford it, or they have different barriers. But I think if we can marry that, what a job needs with the private business and what public institutions are doing, I think that would be a really great win for us.
Chairwoman Collier, you mentioned barriers to entry for higher education, and I did want to talk about SB 17, the ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Dallas Morning News earlier this summer wrote a very good article about some of the ramifications of that law. I think, if I remember correctly, it was 131 scholarship programs that had been frozen or stopped. And that's obviously a huge impact, because it doesn't mean it's just 131 people who can't go. It's 131 programs which serve multiple people sometimes. And it's a variety of scholarship programs. There was the the lead story was a memorial scholarship for a young Black woman who played basketball, and they wanted to honor her memory that way. But there were also things like for very specific things like geography and location. A person from Arath County who wanted to go to Charleston State, and that's been frozen as well. So do you think that there have been some negative consequences of that law? And what would you suggest to do about that, about the freezing of those programs in the next legislative session?
Well, yes, absolutely. We knew this was coming. In fact, Representative Bhojani and I were very opposed to that bill, SB 17, because we knew that people were going to lose their jobs. Schools were going to have to close departments. We knew that the welcoming space may not be there for a lot of our universities, and the 131 scholarships. That was one thing. For those scholarships, they're not sponsored by the school. The schools aren't doing the scholarships. These are scholarships by private foundations, but they're administered through the school. And because of that administration, they're no longer eligible under SB 17 to be there. So the scholarship for individuals, the one that you talked about, the basketball player, she passed away, and it was in honor of athletes of color. 3 people got that scholarship. It was $5,000 apiece. Now that money's not available. So what we're seeing is that universities are scrambling to try to find a way to reword the same type of scholarship to become in compliance with the state law. Again, getting in the way of the delivery and the work of our schools and universities. Very concerned about the way that the diversity, equity, and inclusion opposition and bans are moving and going. Because if we pride ourselves of being a diverse country that welcomes immigrants, which we all, mostly all are, then we need to show that by having these spaces and places in place. Because remember, we have diversity, equity, inclusion policies because of the historical and systemic discrimination that has perpetuated in our society. So you need to have these spaces and continue to have them for any type of person, for our LGBTQ, for women, men, Black, Muslim, all types of opportunities need to be available. And we need to make sure that people have a cultural understanding that just because we may not come from the same community or the same religious background, we're still welcomed. And so I am very concerned about the trajectory of these bans and what's coming next in the next legislative session. So it takes all of us to be able to speak up and share your opinion and your voice without fear of retribution about what we should be doing and we can do to make our country and our state and our schools more welcoming.
So I think, and diversity is really important, as Representative Collier said, not just for an educational institution, but for workforce, right? When you go out in the real world, there are a lot of people with different perspectives, different backgrounds, and they enrich your perspective. Right? My daughter was blessed to be able to do a study abroad program in Kenya, in Nairobi, Kenya. And the people that she talked to, they gave her such an amazing perspective, and they did, at the end of the session, they did a service project where they took sanitary pads to the rural villages in Kenya. And that perspective cannot be matched by anywhere else. And so I feel if you have different perspectives on the table, whether it's in the legislature, whether it's in the higher education, whether it's in your business, or whether it's in public office, I think it's so important because it'll make our state better, our country better, and it'll make the outcomes better. And so I feel I always want to get different perspectives. Even in my staff, right? We have Sumanpreet here and Jordan here and probably listening from far, my Chief of Staff, Sophia, and others. And it is, I look for that. I seek that out because I may be blind to things that I just don't know, right? I'm born in Pakistan, studied in UK, went to Canada, and now I'm in America. I'm a global citizen, and I think we all need to have that global perspective to be able to make anything, accomplish anything in life. And I think that's where we are saying, let's promote that more, not stop it, right? Because it's going to be bad for a state and bad for a country. Thank you.
Senator King, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. If these were foreseen consequences, or if this is something that is surprising to you, and sort of if you think there needs to be changes. Chairwoman Collier is talking about universities changing the wording on it, but theoretically, if the thinking behind it is to stop these programs, then changing the wording wouldn't work, right? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
And first, let me premise this with, we all like each other very much. And there's some things we disagree on, some of them very strongly. This is probably one of them. But it's at a personal level, we are all good friends, and we actually work very well together. As Republicans and Democrats, we're not in Washington. So we're not at all. And let me kind of go to more of a fundamental level to start it off. Anytime government or people judge anyone by their group, it is a very, very dangerous thing. And it doesn't lead to inclusion, it leads to just the opposite. A perfect example is the incredibly shocking rise we have in anti-Semitism, which is apparently just an amount of hatred of the Jewish community out there that we thought was long gone in America. The issue with DEI is the equity standpoint. Equity is different from equality. The idea of equity is equal outcomes for everybody. The idea of equality, which is what our Constitution was based on, both the U.S. and our state Constitution, is based on, equality is on equal opportunity for each person. That's a distinct difference from equity, which is equal outcomes. Today in the United States and everywhere in Texas, at every level of government, it is against the law to discriminate in education, in employment, in government employment in particular. It is completely against the law at every level of government So the prejudice that we do have today, which, you know, regardless of whether I agreed with him as a president, it was exciting for me to see that we elected an African-American as president, that we have an African-American as a vice president today. To me, that's equal opportunity. People who voted for him, I don't think they voted for him. I don't think they're going to vote for, if they vote for Kamala, that it will not vote for her because she's black. They're going to vote for her because they think she is or is not, or they're going to vote against her because she thinks she's, in my case, that she's not the best person for the job. But anytime you begin to judge by groups, and that is exactly what DEI, what CRT, things like that do. They judge a person by their group, not by their character. And I think that's very, very dangerous. And history shows us that leads to unrest, that leads to persecution, and leads to a lot of bad things. Now, I can tell you this, I'm on the higher education subcommittee, and I sat through all the hearings that we had on DEI. And the big surprise for me was that we would ask, and I'm sorry, I didn't know you were going to ask this question, or I would have looked up which institutions it was, but we had institutions that we would say, okay, since you've implemented this program, tell us what the stats are, how has your diversity enrollment increased? And in some, it had decreased, but yet they'd spent millions and millions of dollars. So in that case, there also just wasn't an ability to show that it was even an effective program. But I think from the fundamental perspective of, and I believe very strongly in this, and I believe the Constitution supports this, I believe Dr. King, that's what he spoke about, was judging people by their character and not the color of their skin. And I think when you divide people into groups, whether it's Jewish or Christian, whether it's Muslim or Christian, whether it's black or white, whether it's male or female, whatever it is, I think when you begin to judge people by their groups, which is what DEI did, I think that's fundamentally dangerous and leads to a lot more bad things than it will ever lead to in good.
I think Chairwoman Collier wants to say something, but I just want to clarify. So for you, there doesn't need to be any tweaking. You are satisfied with the law as it is currently, Senator King.
I say that with a caveat. Every time we go back in the Higher Ed Committee, we're going to look at that issue again, and because it's going to come back up. And unless something has changed, then I'm satisfied with it.
Just want to clarify some things because we don't have time to flesh everything out. But we did hear testimony that the admissions for people of color had reduced, but that does not take into account the totality of the circumstances in terms of affordability. It doesn't take into account access. There's certain factors, while these numbers may be going down, people of color traditionally are disadvantaged when it comes down to opportunity. So the numbers may go down, but it may not be just because of the title or the department. It may be other factors. So we got to make sure that we take that into account because just saying that may sound astonishing. Oh, diverse numbers went down when they created these diversity, equity, inclusion offices. But what else was going on? What else? Where was there weren't free tuition? Colleges didn't have free tuition like they do now. Colleges, didn't have campuses everywhere. So I think that we've got to be mindful. And Dr. King said to judge people based on the content of their character because people were judging them on the color of their skin. So you had to say, don't look at their skin color, look at their character, because you are judging someone based on their color of their skin and you are disadvantaging them. So we got to make sure that we remember the context that Dr. King said that, and it was only because Black and brown people were being discriminated against because of the color of their skin. And the reason why we have these diversity, equity, and inclusion offices is for that very reason. And it continues to persist today by the policies in place at all levels of government. We still see systemic racism. So whether it's, small things like the cost of tuition or saying that your credit score has to be X amount to qualify for a small business loan, when people of color have been traditionally challenged, that they don't have those accesses. These are small things that are still barriers for opportunity for everybody. And so, yes, we want to include everyone, but let's make sure we're all at the same starting line before we do that, so we can do that.
Thank you for those answers. Obviously, you guys are very passionate about it and have varying perspectives on it. Let's talk about housing affordability. My colleague Joshua Fechter recently wrote a story that 9 out of 10 Texans say housing costs too much. That's according to a University of Houston and TSU poll. Do you all feel that here in Tarrant County? And what can you as lawmakers do to address that? We'll start with you, Representative Bhojani.
Sure. Yeah, I think buying a house is your ultimate American dream, right? That's how most Americans build their wealth, by buying a home and then passing it down to the next generation and pay it off. Right now, it's getting extremely, extremely expensive. Just the costs have increased, the price has increased, and then the property taxes are also really high. And so this, if you add everything up, it's very difficult. I was talking to one of the home builders last week, and he was telling me that on a $400,000 home, the cost of all the regulatory compliance is $100,000. 25% of a cost of the home in that particular scenario was regulatory compliance. So, me and my staff are now looking at ways that we can address that to see how can we make those more affordable. Are there kinks in the system that we can resolve to make it more easier for home builders to build affordable housing? It is really important. I was really honored to champion a bill last session that said first-time home buyers, let's give them a property tax credit for 1 year, the first year of their home purchase, right? They already have so much that they need to save for, right? It's a small family, young family that they're trying to save up for. Let's not beat them up with this 1 year worth of property taxes on that home. It didn't go anywhere last session, but I really look forward to figuring out, because property taxes is getting out of hand in our state. And I'm glad that last session we did give a property tax relief, $18 billion, largest property tax relief in the history of the state of Texas. But I mean, you could have spent that money in teachers' pay and so many different ways as well. But I think if we need to look at different ways, and I'll continue talking to my colleagues to make sure that we have affordability in the state of Texas.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Affordable housing is definitely a big issue that we need to address. And I'm proud to see the work that City of Fort Worth is doing to make sure that we have developers investing in our area, because we are growing very fast in Fort Worth. But when you think about housing, the cost, not only is the actual unit can get expensive, or your mortgage because the interest rates, but your insurance. Oh my goodness, I don't know about you guys, but my property insurance doubled, and nothing else has really changed. So these are things that we could look at the state level. Your property and your auto insurance. They look at our zip codes. There's so many different factors that are taken into account when they're coming up with those rates. And so if we're getting charged double, imagine that the landlord is too, or the developer is also getting charged, and they're going to have to pass that on. I read that we're about 23,000 units short in our county for having access. So we need to have more investment. So one way that I do that is supporting our Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs to have these tax credits. These tax credits bring affordable units for the needs of that community. We got 2 in my district, in House District 95, one senior community. Well, actually, both were senior communities, because that's, if you're on a fixed income, the rising rent is not a good thing for you, because your income does not increase just because your rates went up for your home. So making sure that we have funding for the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs to do those tax credits that we work with our cities with, and make those units available and affordable and high quality. Make sure that we get some quality units here. So that's something that I'm working on, and I want to make sure that we continue to invest in, as well as addressing the cost of our insurance.
Yep, we're probably all pretty close to the same page on this. I think, and we've got some home builders here, but I think I'm right in these numbers that the median price of a home in Tarrant County in the last 4 years has increased from $250,000 to $360,000. The vast, vast majority of that is all inflation, which was totally unnecessary. We mentioned Washington. It's totally the result of unfettered spending and unfettered money being printed and poured into the economy. Too much money, too few goods. It's always it always leads to rampant inflation, and it's hit the construction industry and materials as hard as anywhere, as hard as the grocery store, which are the two places that have been hit the hardest. So that's been a big part of that. Last session, we did do several things. Like Nicole mentioned, we reduced the property tax on schools. State doesn't have a property tax, but we can buy down the school property tax. We compressed that, bought it down about 10.7 cents. We also raised the homestead from exemption from $40,000 to $100,000 and put that in the Constitution so it couldn't be changed by a future legislature. That was particularly important, particularly for low income and for first-time home buyers, because if you're in a $1 million house and we just gave you a $100,000 exemption, that's nice. If you're in a $250,000 house and you got a $100,000 exemption, that is a lot of money, and that's very important. So that was a very good move. We're going to have, as we go into this next session, we're going to have a surplus, meaning that we had a budget that was a very conservative budget, and over the course of the 2 years, much more revenue has come in terms of tax dollars to the wonderful economic development in Texas. We're blowing away every other state. 8th largest economy in the world if we were our own nation. More Fortune 500 companies than any other state. The leading exporter, of course, of energy, but we're also the leading exporter of technology. We're the new Silicon Valley. You can go on and on and on. But we're going to have a surplus, probably a little over $20 billion. And hopefully we'll do with it like we did last session, which I think is what you do in your families and your business, is there's things that you don't spend money on because you don't want to go borrow money to do it. You wait until you've got a surplus to do that, a savings to do that. And so last time we used that surplus for taxes. We used it to increase TxDOT's funding. All of us are fixing to go from having phone calls about traffic to having phone call complaints about all the traffic construction. We created a water fund. We created a rural broadband fund. We did a number of things with money that was a one-time expenditures that we could put into the system. I think we'll do that this next time, but I also think we'll take part of that and use it to do another property tax cut. I don't know what form it'll be in, because of we need to make sure that our business community is benefiting from that as well. We also bought down the franchise tax, took 67,000 small businesses off the tax roll last session by increasing the exemption for small business on the franchise tax. But I hope, and I really think it will occur, that we'll see quite a bit of that directed toward single-family residents. We may even, I'm hoping too, we can also direct some of it towards second homes. A lot of people have a rent house, maybe their parents live in it. I've got one that my children live in, and it would be nice to have some of those exemptions pass over to those as well. But I'm telling you, the number one reason, well, aside from the fact we're growing so fast here because people want to move here, and that obviously creates greater demand and raises prices, but the number one reason that homes are so much more expensive are because of, as Nicole said, the insurance rates, which are really tied to material costs and all that, the inflation and how it's impacted the cost of construction materials, and then, of course, your property taxes.
It sounds like we're talking about property taxes a lot, and it seems like the previous property tax bill is actually working at holding the rates at the levels that I think the legislature sort of wanted. It's hard to sort of see that, I guess, with the economic conditions, but the analysis shows that it is helping. But I want to talk for people who property taxes are for people who already have homes, who already have properties, but for people who are trying to get into home ownership. What kinds of things can you do? You mentioned that there are home builders here. There are things that are being talked about, such as changes to zoning laws across the state, or loosening regulations on ADUs, accessory dwelling units, granny flats, whatever you want to call them, that housing experts say create more affordable housing. How are you all thinking about those? Are those things that you all would consider?
Go ahead.
I haven't considered ADUs, and my constituents have already. I represent people, and I try to make sure that I am their voice, and my constituents have indicated an opposition to ADUs. I feel like it's a local thing when it comes to zoning. Austin people at the state, it's not appropriate for us to tell you every city how to do it, because everything is different. You know, it's not every one size fits all. So you want the local government to be able to make the decisions that is appropriate. So if that local government says no ADUs, then so be it. But if that government says yes, but not at the state level, we shouldn't tell you how to zone your property or your city, because then we might as well just eliminate you then just the state do everything. I was in one U.S. territory, and the state government does everything. They do the roads, they're the city council, they're the county commissioners, they're the school board, but we don't have that. We have levels of government, and then let's let them lead. Let them lead, and let them do that by creating policies that are appropriate for the people that they represent. And one thing, just want to make sure that we address renters. So not everybody, like you said, is in a home, but we need to provide relief for renters as well. I have a lot of people who are renting. And so if the state is saying that the cities cannot create programs to provide rent relief or cannot regulate that, then maybe let's look at another way. Because I always try to find out, how do I work within the system? So if the system says no DEI, then let's try to figure out how to work within that system. If the system says no opportunity to cure your rent, then let's see what's another way we can do it. Maybe we look at the landlords and provide some type of fidelity bonding for them, or some type of resource for them to pass on to the renters. So.
I was just going to take a little bit of issue with the way you framed the statement. Everybody is paying property taxes. If you rent, you're paying them through your landlord. It's factored into that rent. If you go to the grocery store, you're paying part of the property tax that the grocer is having to have that building. So property taxes are across the board. The jam we have in Texas, not the jam, it's a good, I don't want to say that because I think it's a good jam. But the issue in Texas, there's only a number of ways the government can raise money. Again, the state doesn't have a property tax. Remember that. That's all local. All ours comes in off the oil and gas severance tax, sales tax, and a number of fees. The vast majority of that is sales tax, which has been doing amazingly well in Texas. But so you can tax people on an income, and we have in the Texas Constitution that we will never have an income tax. We don't want one, because you look at the states. If you go pull up in fact, you can Google color-coded states with income tax and economic development, and the states that have income tax are all doing worse economically than the states without a income tax. We don't want an income tax. We can't do it anyway. It's in our Constitution that we can't. You can do sales tax, and we've got a pretty good one here at 6 1/4, and then the cities add 2 cents. And those are a little bit regressive because everybody pays them regardless of your income. But at the same time, you don't pay it unless you're buying the product, and so it's fair and flat and predictable and all of that. So you can have a sales tax, you can have an income tax, you can have a lot of fees, and we seem to be pretty good at doing that if you've got a driver's license lately or anything like that. And you can do a business tax, which is, we've got in the franchise tax, which is really dumb because that's taxing capital. When you tax capital, it prevents new businesses and new jobs being opened, and so that's really not a good tax at all. And really all you have left is property tax. And for whatever reason, property taxes are what grew up in Texas for funding schools and local governments. And I think it is the most difficult tax of all to manage, because there is so much subjectivity in it, and there is so much in it that is totally outside the hands of the property owner. Because the appraisals go up in your area, just because people are moving there, all of a sudden your taxes could go up. What we have done also is we have capped local government revenues at 2.5% over the previous year for schools, and 3.5% for all other local taxing districts, to try to take the appraisal make it a little bit less important in what your taxes are. But property taxes are a very difficult tax. I think they're the worst tax of all, honestly. But they are so embedded in Texas, and I think our kids are going to be struggling with how you make that a fair system.
Okay, I think we're at time for questions, so I'll ask people to line up. There's a mic back there. Matt Ewalt is holding his hand up. In the meantime, Senator King, you have been in the news lately with the CenterPoint, questions about CenterPoint, so I did want to give you a chance to address that. This is about the mobile generators in Houston, and you've said that you have felt deceived by CenterPoint and what they did with the mobile generators. I think I read in the Houston Chronicle that there was comments by Houston officials that said that they had mentioned that these were not mobile generators, that this was not necessarily the best solution. We all know that, in the legislature, there's a lot of moving parts. And in fact, multiple people here have voted for the bill that we're talking about. So I just want to give you a chance to sort of talk about how you see the situation and what happened there. And if you could just address that.
Sure. So this has been kind of a Houston area story, so let me kind of back it up a little bit. So remember Storm Uri? The Snowmageddon, as some people call it, but which we shouldn't, because it really was not a funny thing at all. It was a terrible event for Texas in 2021. February the 14th is when it started. We were without electricity for 3, 4, 5 days, depending on where you were at. Over 200 people died. Some froze to death in their homes in Texas in 2021. It was a horrible situation, revealed a lot of weaknesses in our electricity system. About 2 weeks after that, I'm in my office with a number of CEOs from different regulated electric utilities, the lines and poles companies, and I asked them a simple question. I said, what tools did you not have that if you had, you could have helped relieve the suffering through this? And all of them came to the conclusion, they said, look, if we could have just had mobile generators that we could have stuck on the back of 18-wheelers or on small trailers, wheeled them out to a warming center, wheeled them to this small neighborhood, wheeled them to this hospital system, we could have powered up a lot of things and really helped. I said, well, that makes perfect sense. That's about as pragmatic as you can be. And I said, why don't you already have these? And they said, well, we're not allowed to under law. And I thought, well, that's dumb. And so we passed a bill, was unanimous in the House, unanimous in the Senate, that allowed these lines and poles companies to go out and buy mobile generation. Pretty simple. Encore here, in which this area here, all the way from East Texas to West Texas through the Metroplex, Encore did it correctly. They went out and bought about $5 million worth of generators, and they've got them on trailers, and they've used them for tornadoes and wildfires and all kind of things very, very successfully. All the utilities approached it right, the 4 utilities that are of that type around the state of Texas, except CenterPoint went out and they spent over $800 million in buying what they said were mobile generators, but what we have since learned are stationary. They can't be moved. Well, they can, but they're so big, you got to get a permit that takes 5 days to get the permit just to be able to move them. Then you got to have cranes, you got to assemble them, you got to put them on trucks. They're not mobile. Well, they went out and purchased that. And the PUC, Public Utility Commission, was supposed to oversee the implementation of the legislation. The legislature trusted them with that. I think they got kind of deceived in this process as well. At the end of the day, it's become a great conflict, because when we realized this was right after Hurricane Beryl a few weeks ago, and all the people in Houston were without electricity for up to 10 days. And we had a hearing on it in the Senate. We formed a special committee. Why did this happen? I'm vice chair of that committee. And I asked them, what about the mobile generators? Well, we couldn't use them. Of the $800 million they spent, only $500,000 was spent to buy a handful of mobile generators. All the rest were for these stationary. There's a lot of concern, as we've looked at it since then, over the bidding process and a procurement process, that there may have been some fraud or other issues involved in that. At best, it is an incredibly bad business decision by the utility, and an extreme misrepresentation to the legislature. At worst, there may be some very, very serious legal issues involved, and it's going through that right now. And if you go to philking.com, I wrote a pretty scathing report on it a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, and I just want to—I hear you very animated about it, and you're saying that they misrepresented to you that they were mobile generators. You also have said that they. Well, yeah. I mean, I'll give you a good example. The flyer that when they were pushing for the bill, the very flyer that they put out after they had purchased them, because it was a 2-year bill, we did a cleanup of it 2 years later. They put out a flyer asking legislators to vote for the rewrite of the mobile generation bill. And on it, they put pictures of the generators. And all the generators in the picture were on wheels. I mean, it was all the way through that. That's what was represented to us.
Very, very quick cleanup
It was
question,
even
just
called
because
the
I wanted.
mobile generation bill. And I'm sorry I'm so animated, but I felt like I got deceived in this. It was my legislation. I take that very personally, and we just want to get to the bottom of it.
Yes, sir, and thank you. I did want to give you this opportunity. I do want to get to the questions, but just one final clarifying question. You've said that they also did not follow the intent of the law, which you've said is mobile generation. I did notice that, at least in the Houston Chronicle, it said that there was no limits for size, or there was an amendment there that got taken out. Is that something you're looking to fix in the next session?
We did not think it was necessary. I mean, they wouldn't even contemplate it because everyone else.
Because you felt that the intent was mobile.
Well, yeah. I mean, Encore bought 1 and 5 megawatt generators. Encore bought 15, 32 megawatts, which are really big generators. So we just didn't actually think it was necessary. Everybody understood it. Every other utility did it right. Every other utility took a very conservative approach financially to it, except for CenterPoint. I'm disappointed because they've always been a great company, and I just don't know what happened here.
Thank you, Senator King. Questions?
So we have time for 3 questions here, and want to be cognizant of our stop here in a few minutes here. So hopefully we can get to all 3. So we'll go ahead with our first question.
Yes, hello. I am part of a group called United Neighborhoods of Fort Worth. We have about 82 neighborhoods on our list, and we work for neighborhoods to keep neighborhoods up and running. We are hearing that the legislature, both Democrats and Republicans in Texas, have a bill now that there will be no zoning in the state of Texas. And I believe Dan Patrick is working on that bill, or is in charge of that bill, or likes that bill, or.
I'm not aware of anything, and I haven't heard the lieutenant governor speak about that at all, so I'm not aware.
I think there is a conversation about the changing of zoning laws for the housing affordability question that we were just talking about. So that there is a question. I think the speaker has put it on some of the assignments for the.
This is not about ADU.
No, it's not about ADUs. It's about zoning laws. What are the requirements for how many houses could sit in a lot, basically? What was your? Did you have a question?
I think Austin does something like that. I think the city of Austin was looking at something. I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but my constituents have stated that they do not want to decrease lot sizes, and so that's how I will be voting if a bill comes before. But I want to make sure that we don't take away the power of our local government to, I don't think there should be a statewide zoning ban or statewide. I think that the zoning is up to your local government and let them decide. But don't, we shouldn't at the state level tell every city that they need to have 2, dwellings per a fourth of acre or whatever.
And I want to apologize. I misunderstood your question. Yes, I am familiar with that discussion. I thought you had asked if we were going to ban zoning for cities, and I haven't heard any discussion on that.
Representative Bhojani?
For the ADUs, I mean, it's just, I've talked to my cities that I represent. I represent 6 cities: Hurst, Bedford, Arlington, Grand Prairie, and Fort Worth. And they're all saying that certain neighborhoods are not built to have more than one home, right? Think about roads and think about, the sidewalks and all that. Like if you have 100 homes in a subdivision, and then now all of a sudden you can have 200 homes. How are you going to support the infrastructure, the police, the fire, the first responders? The cities cannot do it. And so I think whenever we look at one size fits all for the state of Texas, a huge state like a state of Texas, I'm completely against that because we have our local authorities, local city council members, school boards, county commissioners, and they are best adept to respond to those concerns. And if they get it wrong, I used to be a city council member in D-Euless, right? So I know if we get it wrong, we'll hear from our constituents 2 weeks later in our next meeting. But if the state of Texas gets it wrong, think about it. It's going to take at least 2 years to change that. And so that's why I'm not a proponent of like one size fits all for any kind of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
My name is Reed Bills. Senator King, you mentioned that we might have a $20 billion surplus going into the next session. Has any consideration been given to giving that toward public education?
Actually, the Senate had a $4 billion, billion with a B, $4 billion bill that was left. We sent it over to the House, not blaming them, it was never brought up for a vote. That was for teacher pay raises that ended last session. That money is still carved out and available there for teacher pay raises. It was not attached to school choice. Well, it actually was originally, but at the end, we just passed it as a single standalone bill. And we're really surprised it didn't get picked up in the House. We thought it would the last couple of days. But, I think you'll see a significant amount of money go into school choice. And I think you'll see a significant amount of money go into public school education, particularly that which is directed to the classroom.
Rebuttal from the House. Rebuttal from the House.
Absolutely,
I guess.
yeah. No, this is a really passionate issue of mine, and I've worked a lot with HEBISD, who's present here, Dr. Joe Harrington and Julie Cole, trustee here, and it's really important to fully fund. I mean, so I'm a newbie. I'm a freshman here, right? These are all seasoned legislators here, and I was reading the Constitution, Texas Constitution. One of the only requirements on legislators is to fully fund our public schools, right? And we're not doing that, unfortunately. So we're seeing record number of teacher attrition. We're seeing record numbers of students leaving school districts. We're seeing cost of school districts go skyrocketing. What are we doing to alleviate that, right? I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I know that people like Dr. Joe Harrington are trying their best not to be bankrupt. But here in North Texas, there's so many schools shutting down, right? And we need to make sure that public schools are the only avenue where they take everybody. They don't say, oh, I'm not going to take you because you're disabled. I'm not going to take you because you're so and so and so. Public schools accept everything, and public dollars need to stay in public schools. That's the bottom line, right? How can we give it to a private institution? You think, I mean, and is it, maybe there's, sometimes it's, I call it a scam. Again, we love each other, as legislators, but I think sometimes some policies move us, right? And I look at the kids in my district, I look at kids of Texas, they are our future. And if we're not gonna invest in them, guess what happens? The 8th largest economy goes down, and we're not able to attract all the talent because these kids are not educated well. If you give $10,000 to a parent to take them to a private school and they can't afford it, you think they're going to be able to afford a $30,000, $40,000 tuition, and that's average in North Texas? They're not going to be able to do it, and they'll have to pay for driving them and picking them and dropping them. That's not just possible for people that cannot afford private school education. So let private schools do what they want to do. I have nothing against it. I speak to them. I do all the stuff, but we need to have public dollars stay in public schools. Thank you.
Ditto.
I think we've got
Ditto.
I think we've got enough
So
time
we
for the
have
final
time.
question.
Yep, we have time for one last question.
My name is Cassie Webb, and I came from Lovejoy ISD, so we're on the east side, and we're very similar to Aledo ISD. We are a small-ish district that's semi-rural. We have, though, a gap of about, depending on if you're looking at the state or the federal inclusive amount of per student dollars, we fall as an outlier between $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 away from that median per student average that the governor, that Rep. Harrison the other day likes to throw out. That's much higher. We're the outlier, and we're suffering. We are also, many of us as moms, we are formerly red voting constituents. Can each of y'all give me a commitment? Because I don't know who to vote for. We don't know who to vote for. We're running out of time. There's less than 3 months to the election. And can each of you all give me a commitment as to who should I vote for? Because my loyalty is to my kids before my party. My loyalty is to my community before anything else. Please give me, yes, sir?
Can you clarify your question? What are you asking for?
I'm asking for some campaign commitments because I have not heard.
About what exactly?
About how to fund public schools and how to pull schools out of these enormous budget deficits that have gutted us, that we have laid off teachers and we have cut programs. How do we not only move forward and do the right thing moving forward, but also right the wrongs of the past?
Okay, so we'll start with Representative Bhojani, and we'll go up and end with the upper chamber.
Yeah, this is a passionate issue, so I'll start first. You heard Senator King say we're going to most likely have a $20 billion with a B surplus this session, right? This is an amazing opportunity to make sure that we can increase teacher pay It is not increased. I think there was this Tuesday, there was a public education committee meeting in Austin, and they talked about, we're going to give a bonus to a $2,000 bonus to teachers, which is amazing. Again, don't get me wrong, I'll absolutely vote for it. But that's a Band-Aid solution. We need a permanent solution to fund teacher salaries and increase. We think about inflation that's hitting us at the gas station, at the grocery store, everywhere. For them, it's even more. They've spent, a lot of time of theirs educating our workforce, and they haven't gotten the best part from the state of Texas. So one small bill that I filed last session that I'll continue to file this session, along with Dr. Joe Harrington's help, is making sure the youngest of our kids, we're investing in them, right? Early childhood education is so important. Kids are sponge as soon as they're born, and we're not educating them. It's also a workforce issue, right? Once the kids go to school, their parents can go back to work and be productive as well, so that's important. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a half a day pre-kindergarten for every four-year child that wants to enroll in a public school, right? Half a day kindergarten for 4-year-olds, right? And that's possible. We can get the funding. We have the funding. We have the funding for it. Let's make it, put where our money is, where our mouth is, right? If we wanna fully fund our schools. Thank you.
Fort Worth ISD does that already. They have pre-K already. But I think that's a very valid question, what you asked. You said, I want to know who I should vote for. So you find an issue. If your issue is education savings accounts or vouchers, if that's your issue, then you say, candidate, where do you stand on this? Because this is the make or break issue for me. This is going to be the deciding vote on this is going to be the deciding factor on how I vote. So you already heard Representative Bhojani and I oppose the vouchers, and we heard that you would support the vouchers. So I think that you've got your answer. But I think everybody should do that. You find what matters most to you and your family, to your community, and you ask your candidate, where do you stand on that? And then that's when you make the decision on how to vote. Because if you're not aligned, then that's not the person that you support. And just remember, it's those issues that matter most, because you're not going to agree on everything, but those issues that matter most. I heard you say public schools matter the most for my children. This is where I draw the line. And that's what everybody should do. Look at an issue, find out where they stand, and then make your decision based on that.
Senator King, we'll give you the last word.
Thank you. On the school choice issue, I'll just address that. And of course, if you haven't read the paper in the last few days, you saw the STAR test for Fort Worth ISD. I'm not picking on Fort Worth ISD, but they were very, very, very disappointing. And we can say how that occurred and why it occurred. But I will tell you that there are a lot of schools in Texas that if your child or your grandchild was in it, you would be doing everything you could to get that child out of that school district. You would be moving them to a private school. You'd be getting them to move in with you so they can go to a different public school, whatever it may be. You would be doing whatever you could. All school choice is about giving parents who are in a failing school district, or maybe their daughter's getting drugged into gangs, or maybe there's other issues, and that mother or grandmother or whoever it is just wants some options. I can tell you that we have school choice in 34 states, red and blue states. I can point you to over 160 objective studies of school choice throughout those states. They point out some problems in them, as always happens, but by and large, the far majority of the results have been very positive in 34 states. It's really kind of surprising that Texas has not done this already. And so again, all it's about, and frankly, a little competition is good for everybody. Every business wants to be a monopoly. Every government agency wants to be a monopoly. Competition, a little competition is good. And you go look at Florida, you look at other states, Arizona, that have done this. Oklahoma's just recently done it. Almost without exception, they've had very, very good results. And it's just given parents some option. And it's their child. They should get to determine where their child goes to school rather than their zip code determining that. And that's all school choice is, even if it's fully implemented, if it's like other states, maybe after 10 years or so, 10% or 15% of the kids would not be in public education, and that's a high-end number. It's probably be lower than that, probably 5 to 7%. It's just about giving parents choice. We can economically afford to do it without taking any money away from public schools. All the bills that were filed last session, all the ones that passed out of the Senate on this, Each one of them had increases in public school funding tied to those bills. And I'm very confident the ones we pass this next year will as well.
Thank you, Senator King. Representative Bhojani, I think we're going to have to leave it at there. I know it's an issue, a passion issue for all of you. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to Tarrant County. Please help me give them a warm round of applause.